we have John the Baptist presented to us. And so today we have John's proclamation of the coming of the promised one, of the Messiah. But the most important thing is his quotation from the prophet Isaiah about making the rough ways smooth and filling in the valleys and doing everything to make it possible for the Holy One to make his entrance into the lives of his people once again, and to come in a way that has never been experienced quite the same way before. And so they hear this announcement, and of course, as we know from previous readings about John the Baptist, that John preaches this baptism of repentance, and people come to the Jordan River to be baptized as a sign of their willingness to be cleansed from sin and resume a righteous way of life with God. And so this is the background that we have to help highlight what it is that John is saying. And for us, as we enter into this season of Advent, there is still a penitential tone to this season. It's very hard to find at times, and harder to kind of live out because of just all the demands that are made on us to prepare for Christmas and the parties that are going on and all kinds of things. Hardly anything seems penitential, and you really have to work hard at it to observe any kind of discipline during this season. But yet, I want to recommend that we pay attention to our own spiritual state right in the here and now. Are we living our Christian life with the same kind of emphasis as we ought? Meaning, are we really putting others before ourselves? Are we really considering above all who it is that we follow and what it is that Christ demands of you and me? In other words, are we continuing to just be as we've been, and if we are prejudiced against certain groups of people, if we can never say anything good about anything that's going on in our world, in the country, whatever, if we are more concerned about ourselves and not so concerned about anybody else, if we find we have a lot of anger and resentment in our hearts, we are making it very difficult for us to really rejoice in the Lord coming to us. Now, we know that Jesus is already here, where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name. We know that in the proclamation of his word, particularly in the gospel, that Christ is made present. And certainly in the sacrament of the altar, we know that we receive Christ, his body and his blood. And so it's not that Christ is absent from us, but perhaps our awareness of Christ's presence is what is lacking. Now, Malachi, that first reading today, talks about the coming of this Lord to his people. And part of that is going to be a call to reform, that he's going to be using fuller's soap and refining silver. And so he is going to be making demands on this people for their change of heart and mind and attitude, that there's going to be repentance required of this people if they're going to experience the salvation that God is coming to bring them. And over again, didn't the prophets call the people to this awareness that, there's a covenant that God has made with you, but how often have you fallen down on your end of this thing because you've been unjust and you have been unfair and you have been angry and hateful and violent and unfaithful to God to do things your own way. And so Malachi's laying it out for them probably right after the exile was over in Babylon, to be aware that God is going to be doing a new thing. It took a long time for that new thing to happen. But the people had a tendency between prophets to forget. And then when there were no more prophets, they tended to forget even longer periods of time, until there would be different ones who would come and want to renew that covenant and reinvigorate the festivals that they had, particularly like Hanukkah, that's winding down right now. That they would be reminded over and over again of their place in God's plan, the role that He had for them, but that it wouldn't work out to be the kind of impactful experience that it was meant to be unless they were right with God. So what we're being called to is a sincere examination of our own consciences. Are there things that we have been holding on to that we need to let go of? Are there resentments that we cling to? Are there prejudices that we hold on to? Is there unforgiveness? Do we keep bringing up things to people instead of being able to handle an issue so that they are put away? And that we don't keep dredging up this old stuff again and again and again as kind of a weapon to use against somebody else? Are we being just? Are we being fair in our daily activities? If we're still working, are we working honorably, or are we slacking off and cheating one way or another? With our neighbors, are we being honest? With our own family members, are we being honest with them? If we really think we need to say something or confront somebody, do we? Are we willing to do that, or are we afraid? And as I'm putting these things out to you, I'm putting them out to myself as well. So these things that we sometimes stubbornly cling to, or that cling to us, even though we're going through everything that we do, we're here this morning and we have our plans for continuing to worship and to do whatever it is that we're going to do. But can I hear God saying to me, you need to let go of that. You need to forgive that person. You need to change your attitude. You really need to rethink how you look at that group of people. You need to examine your motives for doing things or for the things that you say. You need to stop gossiping. You need to stop whatever it might be that stands in the way of you being the instrument of the presence of the Lord, instead of becoming an obstacle to His love and His life coming through you. Paul, in that reading from Philippians today, is reminding the Philippians how important they are to him. and he's hoping that he is equally important to them. And he's writing to them while he's in prison because he wants to make sure that that relationship that they have continues, but not just because of the human aspect of it. It's because he wants to make sure that their faith is maturing and that they're not going to slide back into previous behaviors and attitudes that will then become a wall between them and Christ, that will block God's grace, that will make them less than they have been called to be. So that's you and me. Advent is a short time. Advent is this time when, instead of just being kind of swept along by everything that's going on, that we make a conscious effort, even if it's 5 minutes out of your day, a conscious effort to ask the Lord for the grace, for the vision to see what needs to change in me, what needs to be repented of, what needs to be confessed and let go of, so that that grace can come, so that the light of Christ can shine more brightly on me and through me. So that when we come to Christmas, it's not just a historical commemoration or a ton of responsibilities and efforts that we have to put forth, but so that it would be really a celebration of that acknowledgement of God with us and God within us, and of how we are so blessed to have been called by Christ to be his holy ones, to give the knowledge of salvation, as we hear in the Canticle of Zachariah today that stood in place of the psalm, through our witness, through our words, through our actions, through this Christ who comes again to us today, particularly nourishing and strengthening us so that we can know that he is ours and that we are his.